Sustainable Compute, Aligning AI, Web3, and the Climate. I'm going to ask Stephen Haft to come to the stage, please. He is the co-founder of Ethereum Climate Platform. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Alex Neumuller, can you please come to the stage? He's a research lead of digital assets, energy, and climate impact for Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance. Welcome, Alex. And last but certainly not least, look at this amazing jacket. Marieke Flament, investor and advisor of IG Group, UNICEF, Project Europe. Welcome. Are you good?
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, good afternoon. It seems that when we talk about climate, not many people are left in the audience, which is a hard time. We're going to talk about energy, AI, and blockchain, and the intersection of those three, and actually why now is a very, very important moment that we're living. I'm absolutely delighted to be here on this panel with actually incredible, deep, thoughtful people. So first, Stephen Haft. He told me just before coming on the panel, he's the oldest person in Web3. I think he's the wisest person in Web3. Stephen, you and I have known each other for years. I admire your thoughtfulness and deepness on this topic, so I look forward to hearing everything you have to say, especially given your experience. Alex Neumuller, also with us. He's actually a researcher very known for his research, in particular in the field of Bitcoin mining. His research is often quoted on papers like Bloomberg, CNBC, and the like and the forth. So also we had the opportunity before coming here to actually go a bit more in depth in the topic, and I'm really looking forward to your insights on this. Before we go into some questions, just wanted to plant the seed. So we seem to be at a time where AI is absolutely energivore. There's not enough energy that AI cannot consume. Equally, what AI needs seems to be very localized. It's all about like what's in a country. It's all about latency. It's all about what's the closest to actually what AI will actually need. On the other hand, we have Bitcoin, we have mining, we have crypto, and that seems to be a bit less reliant on proximity and on the maximum amount of energy, but more on efficiency and actually a cost per terawatt. Again, putting things in perspective, AI today is roughly 2% of our energy consumption, and crypto is roughly a quarter of that. Humongous numbers. So, I mean, I planted the seed a little bit like maybe badly, so let's go to the experts. Why don't we start with you actually, Alexander? Tell us about Bitcoin mining. What are actually the things that you're seeing and the trends?
Yes, thanks a lot. Is it working? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, hello everyone. Very nice to be here. Thanks for the organizer for inviting me. I think mining is a very interesting topic. It has evolved. I mean, it was kind of how things started, right, with proof of work. It has evolved quite a lot over more than a decade, essentially, where we started really with kind of at-home laptops, desktop computers, to more GPU settings, to now where we are since about 2013, really starting to see this really kind of professionalized environment, industrial scale facilities really, since the kind of dawn, essentially, of the ASICs. And yeah, as was nicely said before, my work is primarily focused on kind of better understanding how the mining environment operates, essentially, because as I mean, we're in this kind of Web3 environment, so many of the information you receive is pretty much on-chain, whereas specifically when it comes to mining, there's a lot of kind of off-chain. You need to understand really from those stakeholders exactly what are the energy costs and all these kind of things, where they're located, for instance, as well. And yeah, the current environment is really, if we first think of it geographically, it has shifted from in the past China to predominantly the United States, but we see also a lot of activity, for instance, South America, the Middle East, Africa, interestingly emerging, and Europe is not that, I would say, a big player in mining. In Northern Europe, there is some activity there. Yeah, I said before as well, I think when we think about mining, and as it is currently, it's a very competitive business. So it's not just you plug in your kind of ASICs in your shed somewhere. First of all, you will get a bit of a trouble with the heat management. And secondly, it's just too expensive, right? So mining is really currently a very highly competitive business where essentially every cent you pay per kilowatt hour can really make or break your business model. So when we think about AI, it's a bit different. It's more about, okay, I need power, like where can I get it? If we pay 5 cents more, it's maybe not kind of a major issue for you. It's really kind of how can I get the access. So to give you some kind of statistics about basically about 80, what we found, and we just recently published a very large report specifically serving about 50%, where we managed to survey 50% of the entire network activity in terms of mining, so that was quite substantial. And here we found that about 80% of cash OPEX is going into electricity costs, so that's kind of really a key factor when it comes to mining. And so if you think about, for instance, Bitcoin mining firms, currently as it stands, what they are not looking to, locate in the middle of Austin in some population center, because that's just far too expensive, right? So what they're really looking into now is trying to find the essentially cheapest electricity possible, and that is often really stranded electricity in regions where there's simply an oversupply, a general oversupply, for instance, base load when we think about like hydropower in many regions, right? Where they kind of directly locate to in those specific areas, because it's a very location agnostic business. You are not kind of constrained, for instance, by low latency requirements and those sort of things. So you really have the the need, not the opportunity, to find a place where you just can get the cheapest power possible, and that is often, for instance, renewables, but that is also, for instance, co-locating to upstream oil and gas fields, trying where, I don't want to go too deep into this now, but essentially, if you drill for oil, gas is coming out, and the point is, can you do something with it or not? If you don't, then you need to either vent. The worst thing you can do is vent. You just let it out in the air, which is illegal in most jurisdictions, and it's definitely not something you should do. Or you burn it, right? Just to convert kind of methane to CO2. And what we see now in mining, but also to some extent AI, is that creative solutions where those firms directly put on-site a gas engine and produce essentially the power that powers directly compute infrastructure on-site on, for instance, oil fields. And it's a very fascinating topic, actually, but I'm going to stop now. Not
I love it. Before the panel, Alexander told me, he said, sometimes I talk a lot, so you'll need to stop me. Great, let's move on. Thank you. No, but I think phenomenal insight. And by the way, you've done a lot of research on that, so I also highly encourage people to check out what you write, because I think there's so much that. But maybe
where can we see this research? Where's you might as well tell everybody what is the URL to go to look at your research, because for all of us, it's highly relevant, especially the people who showed up in this room. It's highly relevant, I think.
Yeah, sure. I cannot put the URL up now, but it's basically directly on our website, where I can't recite it from my head, but essentially, if you go to the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance website, you will find a subcategory publications, and it should be the first publication. It's called the Cambridge Digital Mining. But please, afterwards, if you're interested, I'm still here today, I'm here tomorrow, so you can just also come to me, reach out, and then I can then basically show you directly the link, or you can, thanks Stephen for reminding me to promote my work.
Are you the moderator now? No, sorry. No, okay, over to you actually, Stephen. So what trends are you seeing, whether it's in mining or actually also, let's link to AI?
I think the trend that I see at a high level is that we are at an inflection point. Everybody says that, but I think we can prove it here. We are at an inflection point where the relationship between the much hyped blockchain and the much hyped AI are being reminded of the importance of staying rooted in the communities we're a part of. We have sort of segregated these conversations out to the marketing department or the lone public goods intern that works at one company or another. We can't afford to do this any longer for our very survival. Because in point of fact, there's 195, you work at UNICEF, it's I think 195 countries. In 195 countries, there's not one that actually has the electrical infrastructure or grid in place for AI, blockchain, data centers, and for however many 100 millions, or in some cases hundreds of millions of people actually live in the country, go to school, need dry cleaning done, need to get to work. There isn't enough electrical infrastructure anywhere in the world to support all those things and our collective growth as an industry. So you really can't run a company today, I think, responsibly without having what I'll call a new CEO. The new CEO is the Chief Energy Officer. All of our companies need a Chief Energy Officer in order for us to have the kinds of futures we, hyperscaling, hope for ourselves as companies. It's funny to be having this conversation in what I'm guessing was probably Marie Antoinette's shoe closet. When this was built, the much hyped subject of the day was King Louis and Marie Antoinette, and we know how that came. They lost connection to community, and we know what happened there. We, I think, are facing an equally urgent set of conversations that are taking place right now when a very pro-technology head of state like Bjorni in Iceland says, I cannot run Bitcoin mines and run my schools. I have to throw my Bitcoin miners out. This is a canary in the coal mine, as we call it. It's the harbinger of things to come that we are going to face. And believe me, when it comes time to allocate electrical grid, it will go to the schools, it will go to towns and people and citizens who vote. They'll get the majority of it. Then, frankly, those of us who are in the Web3 world, I don't think we're next. I think the jingoism around being king of AI probably comes next. And whatever's left whatever that is, and it won't be much, might go to Web3. So if you're, as I am, in a Web3 company that has, a bright future, I'd like to think, I would be thinking today about where the energy is going to come to power that future.
And maybe actually building on that, one topic I wanted to talk about is whether we see, when it comes to energy consumption, AI and crypto, do we see them as actually competing for the same thing? Or do we actually see them as complementing each other? Alexander, I don't know if you want to build on that. Competing, complementing?
Yeah, sure. It's a very, very good question, and it's one that is quite easy to answer. So I don't think compete, right? Because as said in the beginning, there is no kind of reasonable way a mining firm could compete with, for instance, an AI hyperscaler about power. And we talk about, in both cases, hundreds of megawatts. So in terms of what someone is willing to pay, it's just very different. So I think what we are currently seeing is just a massive increase in kind of the computational needs of kind of leading edge AI models. So for instance, just to give you some figure here, essentially since 2010, the computation intensity of those models has increased by about 6 to 7 times per year. So this is really kind of an exponential growth that we are seeing, and to kind of feed this, we will, as said, we will need a lot of power. And as also Stephen mentioned, most likely when it comes to a location, also from a country perspective, if it comes down to whether we power mining or AI, most likely countries would go for AI, right? And here, but what we are currently seeing is also a lot of mining companies, actually, specifically public companies, trying to, first of all, diversify their business model, right? Specifically, mining is getting more competitive. We have one halving coming after the other, so there will be kind of big economic questions going forward. And what we are now seeing is kind of this complementary nature, where a lot of these companies now start thinking, hey, can we, because in some cases, given that power is such a fundamental need in both cases, many of those firms have huge PPAs, so they already have kind of contracts in place that allow them to build actually this infrastructure and get the power. So many of them are now diversifying into building kind of this AI infrastructure as well. It is, however, a very different business model from many angles, right? Most importantly, the capex is just fundamentally different. It's close to about 40 times more expensive per megawatt to build AI infrastructure than to do Bitcoin mining. So here, I think what we're going to see is this kind of synergies, where, for instance, specifically when we think about AI inferencing, you have very varying utilization rate, right? So you don't have constant demand for AI inferencing. So if you look at it, it looks like waves. 50, 80%. It is kind of there's a bit of variation in there. And specifically going forward, if you talk to your utility, your power provider, if a lot of these companies show this kind of sort of variations, and this might also be tricky for the grid operator, for instance, to balance kind of the frequency. And here, this is one of those things where we see the synergies, where mining can come in and say, hey, I'm a mining company, and or I'm generally they call themselves mostly energy platforms. So what we want to do is we need like a couple of 100 megawatts, but instead of saying, hey, we need large variable load, we can say, hey, we can demonstrate a predictable load simply by, for instance, filling those valleys you see in AI inferencing, which, for instance, mining. It's very granular, so you can ramp it up and down very quickly. And there is even hardware manufacturers and mining companies that look into kind of building hardware precisely for those sort of use cases, ramping up, down, and up again very quickly. So you can kind of fill those valleys, but then as, for instance, inferencing demand increases, they can ramp down kind of mining activity, but ultimately you can demonstrate kind of a very stable and predictable load profile. And it gives you a bit of a support buffer, because kind of flexibility is also another topic that will be fundamental when it comes to the development kind of AI infrastructure, and generally how all companies think about it. And yeah, we'll stop here again.
Great, thank you. But I think you've outlined actually quite a lot of the potential synergies, but equally like fundamental differences. So I mean, to you, Stephen, like competing, complementing each other, what's your view on the landscape of energy?
Well, I'd say initially complementing in the sense that what everyone recognizes now needs to happen is the creation of new capacity. So until there is capacity at capacity, I mean, in communities that have either blockchain or AI, or in some cases Seattle, where both, they're using 95% of current capacity. So when we talk about blockchain and AI and the energy future, we're actually talking about the political will, building the political will for new capacity. New capacity will probably require a collaboration of tech companies, much the same way we find ourselves collaborating around we've all been illegal for years, right? One of the things we're kind of celebrating between MiCA and the new administration in Washington is that suddenly we're not being debanked, suddenly we're kind of legal, and we have seen kind of a new set of opportunities emerge for our business and tremendous urgency around AI. I think in the same way going forward, we're probably not we're going to have to stay in those state capitals and national capitals and start collaborating around getting those very same governments to adopt new energy policies that makes room for everybody's needs, including ours. And this has another aspect of good news, because we all know, here we are in the city of Paris, the Paris Accords, right? The global climate treaty. A lot of important treaties were made in this city, right? We ended a couple of wars here too. But the Paris Accords, the global climate contract of nations, was made in this city. And on a go-forward basis, if we are going to be building new capacity, we also, maybe our CEOs, our chief energy officers of your company and your company and your company and our company consensus, ought to be talking to each other and in the state capitals about making those new energy sources renewable. We actually have a chance to also clean this up, clean the planet up a bit for our children, for our users, and frankly, for our own public goods and social conscience. So there is an opportunity here. It is an opportunity that requires radical collaboration across the tech sector. And things like the Ethereum Climate Platform. I mean, Marieke and I know each other through several different battles and wars over the years, on which we were always on the same side, by the way. It's not we were battling each other. But in doing things like taking on the climate, Marieke was very helpful as we were launching the Ethereum Climate Platform, as was Microsoft and OKX and across the even non-Ethereum, even non-EVM chains joined in this effort to create radical collaboration around the event that took place in 2022 when Ethereum managed to clean up its carbon footprint 99.92% overnight in what was known as the merge, as we debuted our new consensus mechanism. And by the way, when I use that figure, 99.92%, I know it's a good figure because he came up with it actually at Cambridge University and measured the Ethereum carbon footprint in the weeks before the merge and the weeks after, and did the science that went into that calculation.
Well, we have a little bit, only 5 minutes, right? Only 5 minutes left. But I want to start wrapping and actually looking at reasons for being optimists, in particular when it comes to both technologies, whether it's crypto, whether it's AI, and how they may help us further foster. Stephen, you've been talking a lot about communities, this chief energy officer, but also let's talk about what those two technologies can do to help us in our transition. I'm thinking traceability, transparency, maybe other things, maybe.
But if you don't mind.
Okay, then you go first.
Madam Moderator, if I turn the tables on you, because you actually happen to know a lot about this subject. So please don't hesitate. Give us a preview. As it happens, our moderator is actually writing on this subject, which is how she got picked to do this. So why don't you take a second and give us a sense of what's coming from
very
you,
short
because you're one of the big thinkers in this space.
Very short segue, but then I'm really keen to hear your perspective. So I think ultimately we'll be in a world where AI and crypto are convoluting and coming together. I think it's easy to think of AI agents needing crypto wallets and so on and so forth. It's undeniable that both technology require fundamental energy and a lot of it. And I actually think that the power of blockchain through decentralization, traceability, transparency should be a huge enabler for us to actually do better usage of that energy. I'll stop here, I could go on forever, but I'm moderating Stephen here. So, Alexander, please, let's give us some reasons for optimism into trends for the future and how things could be.
Yeah, sure. I think a very interesting part is, let me answer this question twofold. So firstly, I think while AI is a huge, or will be a huge kind of consumer of energy, there is a lot of good that come out of it as well. For instance, when we think about science, where, for instance, you can use AI to, try to analyze different new chemical structures that might help you make new discoveries in battery technology or something like this, right? So there might be some good things coming out of that. There's the entire transportation sector, building efficiency. There's a lot of kind of things where I think AI can help to make our current situation better, frankly. And secondly, to one of Stephen's earlier point, when we think about transmission infrastructure, it's not built. Current infrastructure is not built to really kind of onboard this huge kind of new load. So what we see is, I think, something very interesting. First of all, it might spur a bit of development in new technologies like small nuclear reactors, like SMRs. It might also kind of fundamentally change how we think of, for instance, power very large, we call it load centers. For instance, like a hyperscaler, where you might even see a kind of a microgrid emerging, where you have a huge kind of campus of computational power, or whatever you do, whether it's mining AI or somewhat else. But then you might have a grid access, right? You might have on-site generation that might not be fossil fuel based. Currently, a lot of fossil fuel based, but we might even think that kind of these smaller nuclear reactors. We might have behind the meter access, where, for instance, you can, if possible, you can locate next to a wind farm, for instance, and connect directly to their substation with your substation. And kind of help us to rethink how to manage kind of this increasing demand until really kind of the infrastructure needs to be there at some point anyway, right? We have an entire electrification of all kinds of sectors. So the need to build out transmission lines is there. It's just kind of the pace that it's what AI is developing. It's just not realistic that you can build this out at that pace. But ultimately, it's generally something we need to think about. But at least in the meantime, it, I think, gave us a lot to think about how kind of to be a bit more creative when it comes to onboarding new load.
Excellent. What about you, Stephen? How do we conclude on some optimism?
Well, I would say, I mean, if you're looking for good news, I'd say one bit of good news is there are already learnings in this space. And a key learning, I would say, is modularity, is the word I would use. That data centers are being built with modularity to be able to process ASICs or to be able to process GPUs. Their energy needs are similar enough that one can build infrastructure that accommodates both, and the growth curves will be similarly up, I think, but maybe up in different degrees of hype and success. So the possibility, therefore, of modularity, meaning that there can be a single joint solution that works for both of our spaces, is genuinely good news. That it's not just we got to build this for blockchain, we got to build that for AI. Modularity is what we're learning is the solution. The problem that comes to mind as we recognize there are solutions is that we are very early in both of our games. We are in the first, whatever game you play, we're in the first period, the first quarter of all of our games. And the fact is that the degree to which we are moving as a blockchain industry from having created infrastructure first, Ethereum, the protocol, Bitcoin, we have created infrastructure first. Now we have built on top of infrastructure platforms. That's the second stage. And in much the same way, in large language models, you are still at the training and infrastructure building phase. The unfortunate truth is you then have to go through the platform phase to get to the application phase. And when you hit the application phase and you suddenly have 1 million cars on the road running on AI, the power requirements are really off the charts. So yes, we are seeing some solutions. Reason for optimism was your question, but we are also seeing that we're really at the beginning of this journey, and it's one we're going to have to take together. And I imagine we'll have more to talk about when we meet again next year here.
Excellent. Well, on that note, there are solutions, but we're very early on. Stephen, Alexander, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We know that energy is now a hot topic. Again, not that it wasn't before, but especially with the rise of AI and the demands that's going to have on our grid on top of what we're doing with blockchain, and really appreciate that conversation. So thank you so much. And please give our speakers another round of applause, the ones that just left the stage. Thank you.